Buenos días.
Good morning. More than famous, I would say I'm famous, feminine figure. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, all the Cogam colleagues, for opening this space and for being so resistant and insistent. Thank you, Juan Fernandez, for suggesting my name for this panel. In my case, I'm not going to talk about statistics because I am uncomfortable with statistics. I really prefer political processes, life biographies of struggles. But there are some statistics. I'd also like to appreciate or thank my colleagues for having shared the history of Enrique Poveda, a very difficult but yet very intimate and political story. And this documentary talks of stigmas that are empowering social struggle. And we have to recognize this. And we also have our own stigma, the stigma of obsession, of insistence and persistence. Otherwise, we would not be here at this LGTB conference and HIV positive conference here, and we wouldn't be participating in Gay Pride. We wouldn't see it looking so good today. Now I will read two texts that are part of my book, the Diary of the Gay Chain, which talks about the relationships but with the movement, LGTB movement and AIDS. And we've seen this in a parallel conference on human rights that looks very unstigmatized without HIV. And then we have this conference that's a little bit swept under the rug and hidden here at the Autonomous University of Madrid. I'll show you a photograph that is quite stigmatizing. The condom, this is a campaign where it says a gay Chilean died of cancer. I'd like to share some crazy ideas with you, but because they're crazy, that doesn't mean they're less just, fair, interesting. I am a non-believer, and I formally renounced my Catholic religion. I'm proud to say that. I did it on a Gay Pride Day in a very Catholic country such as Chile. And that church was opposed to the free independent campaign against AIDS. I collaborate and am part of the MUMS movement, which is about sexual diversity, founded more than 20 years ago. I was also a coordinator as a journalist of the magazine called Vivo Positivo, and I speak from my condition of a person infected by the virus. As once a health official in Chile called us a scourge, and she said they needed to fight against the scourge of our group. She didn't realize she was surrounded by political scourges that didn't share her bias. In the same way, we don't question how HIV has been treated by the authorities, such as this minister I just mentioned. Particularly, gay men are treated poorly, and we have to say that HIV has always been a polemic issue, with a lot of tension. And I'd like to talk about a little history of the struggle in Chile. For the oldest group, Mobile, came about on June 28th, 1991, for by a historical group of people who we owe very much to. They raised their voices and organized us to prevent this evil, as the press calls it. Our friends within this group called Acción Gay organized the group and social responses for our community. On June 28th, they held a meeting to commemorate Stonewall in the U.S. in 1969. So then a group of gays from that meeting decided to found a political group of homosexuals to fight for civil rights, social rights, political rights, and cultural rights. And there was no agreement between the parties, among the parties, and Mobile had to step down from the organization. Some say they were expelled. Others say they just retired or stepped down. It's something that we really will never know. But Mobile set up their own site and their own agenda, and after a short time, the same problems arose again regarding whether or not HIV and AIDS should be taken on as a political fight by homosexuals. There was a conservative sector in our group led by Roland Jimenez, and it seems like he was afraid of it being associated with homosexuality being associated with HIV positive and AIDS. There were other more radical persons, among which I include myself, and we wanted to have a seduction strategy that would bring in HIV positive and AIDS into our public fight. And because we had great reason to, especially considering all of those among our ranks who had died of the disease. In many countries, especially the U.S., we've seen that HIV and AIDS have always been efficient tool in giving power to the homosexual community. Finally, the conservative sector and the persons looking to work with HIV and AIDS left, and we had another break in our group. Roberto Pablo and Luis Cartier came about, and then we had members dying up to now. HIV, AIDS continues to be a controversial matter within our organizations and an invisible concern. One might say, why, after so many years, 30 years since the first appearance of someone who was seropositive, are things the way they are? That patient, Edmund Gonzalez, was a homosexual professor in Maipú who died of AIDS. In Savia, our organization, we did research on the community story of HIV and AIDS in Chile, and we realized that there was really a pandemic. This year, we've seen another zero patient, trans patients, but since this was a trans person, it was not allowed to be said that it was the first. Our group of diverse persons, I'm sorry, he's just reading and it's difficult to follow. But the AIDS group, it's like they think we want to be brides dressed in white and not conform in any way to society. I need to go slower because I'm reading very fast, they say. Well, today, gays, we also talk about the fight for abortion, and one asks, why are official gays not really behind these other struggles? After so many years of HIV, we see it still quite alive, and sometimes it's visible, other times it's invisible in political debate. But my own story, what is it? Well, I resist, I struggle, and I fight. My relationship with the virus started in November of '82 when I went for the first time to have to get tested. And this was in Conchalí, a poor commune in Santiago, the north part of the city. And there was a paper called La Comuna, and a journalist, Maxi Fuentes, who was the creator of the valuable information. I became his friend. We talked about militancy and the social fight and cultural fight for of homosexuals. Afterwards, we continued meeting, and this was very important for me to when I was diagnosed as seropositive. And since June the 3rd, 1994, and this is the statistics I'm interested in, I am someone who lives with HIV and AIDS. And this is public since that date. And I have taken on more and more of a political as a fight. And the first years with AIDS for me was all about gaining scientific knowledge on my part. I worked with different community organizations, friends, and colleagues. We met to face the effects of the social discrimination. And there were many hospital groups arising in Santiago that were also against AIDS, and we had to be very politically active, and that's where I went to a press conference given by Luc Montagnier. Who does not know who Luc Montagnier is? Well, Luc Montagnier is the famous French scientist who discovered HIV, our mother. He won the Nobel Prize for Medicine, and he really brought everyone got everyone's attention in Chile when he gave his conferences in Santiago on AIDS back in 1995. His visit with the press in our region asked for support for the group of called Mobile, the gay liberation movement in Chile. He supported the fight of countries like ours, and his role made a lot of people uncomfortable. Dr. Chai, who was head of AIDS treatment in Chile, became very involved and finally helped us resolve many of our problems. But we weren't satisfied with all this controversy, and because there was a rightist mayor involved in this conference who caused us a lot of drama and problems, and HIV then began to really harm my life, and AIDS began to appear. And I didn't have a lot of possibilities for medicine, and I was pretty sure that I was going to die, just as many of my colleagues had. And I remember Manuel Rodriguez, who lived in Santiago. He died, and I um, and I inherited his therapy, and I've kept on nights and days, good times, hard times, contradictory times. We've had shadows, doubts, fear, alienation, stigma. We've seen the good part of the political struggle on our side. And however, AIDS has taken many lives from us, but we continue to fight. I thank life for having given me so much, and I appreciate what so many of my colleagues have done to open up many new worlds for us to continue fighting, going ahead, making new roads as we journey along. As Maria Elena Walsh says, they killed you so many times, and as many times as you've been killed, you will be revived. And when death finally comes, someone will save you so you can continue singing. Thank you very much.
Y para terminar, este es un hecho.
And to finish, you know that the 28th of June was Stonewall, and also in Barcelona. And I'd like to remember that famous political meeting in New York of homosexuals. They wanted to take it on as their own, but the main players were poor transvestites, anarchists, and lots of Latin Americans. So this afternoon, in homage to them, to Silvia Rivera Macha, and all the transvestites that accompany us in our struggle.
Ahora nuestro
Well, now our next speaker is Denis Wamala. He is the director of the program facilitators. I can't read it well. Director of programs, Icebreakers, Uganda.
Good morning. I'm happy to be in Madrid. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for coming here to honor this conference. Like you've heard, my name is Dennis Wamala. I'm from Uganda, and I work with an organization called Icebreakers Uganda. I'm going to make a very brief presentation on what the situation is like for LGBT people who are HIV positive in Uganda, and generally the situation around the legal and cultural issues for LGBT people in Uganda. Thank you. So that's how I've headed my paper. It's just a situation of the LGBT people in Uganda. Go ahead. First, I would like to introduce my organization, which is a care and support organization for LGBT people in Uganda. Icebreakers Uganda was started in 2004, and our main calling or our main mission was to create a family, to create a situation whereby we can support each other as LGBT people. Because we found out that we are going through so many violations, and everyone was living alone. No one had a support system. No one could share their situation and appreciate each other's situation. So we're like, why don't you create a family? Why don't you create something that brings us together? So Icebreakers Uganda started as a family, not as an organization, but as a family of LGBT people who just come together in a house and share their experiences, share their challenges, and help ourselves get solutions. So we developed from a support group to a fully fledged LGBT organization. Our core areas, like you will see in my presentation, is mainly providing support through creating space. We have a house that provides shelter for those who have been violated, those who have been evicted from their houses, those who have been arrested by police and just been given bail. We create that space where people can just walk in and share experiences and feel at home generally outside the very hostile environment that Uganda is. And then we also have programs that educate people on healthy sexual behaviors. Because we realize that while we are talking about HIV, while we are talking about testing and getting all these numbers that all organizations want to have, are we actually explaining to people how they can live a better life sexually? Are we teaching them how they can behave towards each other in a sexual manner that is healthy? That's part of what we do. We also do a lot of advocacy work with government officials, judiciary, with health officials. We try to talk to as many people in the country as possible. And as you might imagine, in Uganda, that's not a very easy thing because everyone looks at you with skepticism. Everyone looks at you as, you have come to tell me about this Western invasion. You've come to try and convince me to accept this unbiblical and African thing. So advocacy in Uganda for LGBT issues is not easy, but we try our best to reach as many people as we can. And of course, we also do research because we want to create as much evidence as possible, because what has happened is over the years we have tried to do our work and we have always been challenged. Where are these LGBT people? Our president once gave a press conference and said in Uganda we don't have gay people. So we don't need any programs to support gay people because they don't exist. So it's through studies that we carry out that we actually produce evidence that we actually exist and we need programs to support us. The country context of HIV is very daunting, more so for LGBT people, because we don't have national data for LGBT people. The government has for long not recognized that LGBT people exist, so it did not bother to collect data around LGBT people. But in a nutshell, the general population has a prevalence rate of between 7 and 8% being HIV positive. That's about 1.4 million people, and Uganda is only a country of about 36 million people. And our own studies and studies by UNAIDS and surveys we have carried out have shown that the prevalence within the LGBT community is twice. So while the general prevalence is at 7.4, the prevalence within men who have sex with men, for example, is at 13.2. So that's twice the average. And that calls for actually twice the effort. But what is happening is that we are seeing zero effort towards a community that has twice the burden of HIV. And of course, with sex workers, it's even higher, 33%. And because culturally, sex work and the LGBT community are looked at as being perverts, being antisocial people, there are no programs that are actually tailor-made to deal with this situation. So it is with figures like this, and these are not figures that are produced by the government, these are figures that are produced by us and with the support of organizations like the World Health Organization and UNAIDS. So it's these figures that we take to the government and tell them, listen, you need to deal with this. If you don't deal with this, it's going to affect the country as a whole. But because most religious leaders who are extremely powerful would rather that if the scourge is that big within the LGBT community, let's just get wiped away by HIV, and then the country maybe the country will be saved of LGBT people and of this embarrassment of same-sex relations. But to try and explain to them how a figure of, for example, 13.2 can translate into the figure of 7.4 within the national average. Because it's one thing looking at the LGBT community as a community or the sides that you can neglect. But when you explain to them how the LGBT community and men who have sex with men interact with the general population, when you explain to them, for example, that some people are bisexual and some people who are claiming to be heterosexual are actually homosexual and having homosexual activities, then people begin to understand that this figure of 13.2 can actually cross over to their bedrooms and affect them. So it's important for us to have such figures in order to do our work. The context in which we are working, I would like to paint for you the picture in which we do our work. We have a legal and policy environment that is not so different from what you've heard from many African countries, and even like it was mentioned in Pakistan. We have a constitution that clearly says marriage is between a man and a woman. So it clearly prohibits any marriage, any same-sex marriage. But no one in Uganda, in the LGBT community, is asking for same-sex marriage. We are asking for things that are extremely basic. Not to be beaten, not to be arrested, not to be violated. But then we also have the Penal Code Act, which are the rules and regulations of the country, which is something that was carried out of the British colonial rules and just transferred into our current rules, that prohibits canon knowledge against the order of nature, which has been translated as homosexual activities. So when you're trying to advocate, when you're trying to reach out to a community that has been outlawed, that is clearly illegal, you're conspiring to promote something that is illegal. So besides the fact that you are gay yourself, you're actually encouraging, the government translates that you're already committing a crime and you're encouraging other people to commit a crime. That is clearly prohibited within the law. So that's how we are working. So that's why it's easy for us to get arrested all the time, because there's actually a law to arrest us. And then Uganda is a very religious country. We have about 90% of the population Christian and the rest Muslims. But you find that the Christians are extremely powerful. They have huge churches, and these churches build schools and hospitals, and they come with these charities that provide all kinds of support to people with disabilities, to women. These churches have very huge HIV programs. So when the religious leaders come out and say, look, we are the good people here. We are the ones preaching to you the word of God. We are the ones giving you the support for HIV. We are the ones building schools, providing free education. And we are the same for telling you that LGBT people are wrong. LGBT people are immoral. it is very easy for the whole population to believe the religious leaders because they are so powerful. Everyone listens to them, and this is happening every week. So when the religious leaders paint themselves as the custodians of morals in the country, and so they direct people on what to believe and what not to believe, you find that we, as activists, have a very small voice. You have about only 50 activists speaking against a whole population of extremely strong and well-funded religious rights. We currently have support from American evangelicals to evangelicals in Uganda. So they come with all these arguments you hear on the internet and all these campaigns you hear, the anti-gay campaigns going on all over the world. They are now ripe in Uganda because they are being supported and extremely highly funded by their partners all over the world. So the religious forces are a big problem for us because everyone listens to them and they speak with one voice when they speak. Actually, homosexuality is one thing that will put all religions together. You'll find Christians and Muslims arguing on so many things, but when it comes to homosexuality, they will make a joint press conference because they all agree on that, on demonizing homosexuality. That is one of the campaigns I wanted to highlight. That is what a leading evangelical pastor who keeps on running campaigns day in and day out. He's very well funded, and so he keeps on galvanizing university students, schools and churches, and going on the streets with huge numbers of people, up to 100,000 people marching and saying no to homosexuality, no to westernization and stuff like that. We also have the issue of patriarchy. Uganda and Africa generally is a very patriarchal society whereby men are supposed to be men. Men are supposed to be the head of the households. Men are supposed to be macho. So when they look at you as a gay man, they're looking at you as violating the principle of patriarchy. They imagine, how are you having sex? Are you reducing yourself to a woman? If you are an effeminate man, why are you acting like a woman? Why are you disrespecting we, the powerful men? So we need to punish you. We need to put you right back into being the macho man you're supposed to be. So the whole homophobia here in Africa is not about exactly people hating men, but people mainly protecting their masculinity and thinking, if you're a man and you start acting like a woman, then you're threatening our power as men. So they need to fight back. And then, of course, we have the media. Media always influences everything, everywhere. And in Uganda, it's one-sided. Even if you paid the media for an ad, for example, saying, please provide ART to men who have sex with men, and you're paying, they won't take your money. They won't run the ad. But then they will run an article for free condemning LGBT issues. So you find that the media is wholly against you. You cannot find any space. They will give all the space possible to fight you, but even if you pay for space, they won't give it to you to fight back. And so all these issues lead to unreported and undocumented violence against the LGBT community. I would say violence against all minorities, but I want to specifically talk about the LGBT community because that's why we are here today. You find that when you have the law against you, when you have the religious leaders against you, when you have all the heads of institutions against you, when you have the media against you, people are going to violate you, and like one of the panelists say, and you won't even know it's violence. You'll ask someone, have you ever been violated? And they will say no. And then you ask them, have you ever been beaten because you're gay? And they will say yes. Because they don't even think that being beaten is a violation. They believe they deserve it because this is what they have grown up hearing from their parents, from their religious leaders, from the politicians. So they don't even know that it's violence. There's an example of one of the volunteers at the organization I work at who had gone out to do some of our work, and he got badly beaten, and so he was bleeding. And this was just after one of our other volunteers had been killed. So that's ongoing violence that happens every day. And people don't even report it unless you follow them to report it. And then generally, the safety and security of the people who do the work we do. It is very hard to get people to work with us. When people see that Dennis was doing this work and he got beaten and he got killed, how do you convince someone else to come and do the same work? The people need to think of their safety and security. They prefer that if I'm living underground, then I'm safer than if I come out to try and speak about the things because they have seen evidence of people being beaten, they have seen evidence of people being killed. So they think about their safety and security first and they would rather not do the work with you. And generally, how do you provide HIV services to a stigmatized community? For someone to come and have a test, for someone to take their drugs and actually stay on their drugs, they need to believe that it's worth it. They need to have that self-worth. But when people are stigmatized, when people believe that they are not worthy of themselves, how do you convince them to stay on treatment? Everyone is telling them they are not worth anything. Everyone is telling them you're worse than pigs, you're worse than dogs, even cows don't do that. How do you convince such a person to take drugs? Because they're already fighting with suicidal instincts. They're thinking, I'm not worth it, maybe I need to move somewhere else, maybe my community doesn't want me, and then you're telling them, no, actually you stay on drugs and you'll be better. It's very hard to get HIV services to a self-stigmatized community. And then, like most of you will know, civil society is a very huge player in promoting the realization of rights, of human rights generally as people, but also for LGBT people. We rely a lot on the civil society. But in a country like Uganda where the civil society is cautious, you can be deregistered for quote unquote promoting homosexuality. You can be admonished by your church because the organization you lead is promoting homosexuality. The civil society is very cautious. How do they deal with LGBT people? They will tell you, you see, we want to support you, we want to deal with you, but can we do it under the curtains? Because if we don't do it under the curtains, then we also get into trouble. So you find that you don't have enough space, enough support from the civil society. Because understandably, they're looking at their positions and they're trying to fight for their own survival. Next slide, please. And so these are some of the press reports we get. For example, I've been listed so many times in the press. They put your name, they put your place of residence, just to try and to promote violence against you. Like, if you want to know where homosexuals are, so and so is a homosexual, and you can find them here, and then that's how violations are promoted. I have to make this faster because I'm running out of time. I'll just skip some of these things so that I can highlight the main things. So the quest for survival, these are things I've highlighted before. How do people survive in an environment where they have been declared worthless? How do people convince themselves that I can actually do drugs and become someone when they just got thrown out of 5 jobs in 1 year just because they were in a certain press as being gay? Go ahead. So I've talked about the narrowing civil society space. I've talked about the denial of health services because sometimes people go to a hospital and the doctor says, I cannot deal with a homosexual. They want to test for an STI, you come with your partner and the doctor is like, I cannot deal with a homosexual. Go find somewhere else where they can promote homosexuality. Go ahead. So we have tried to document, we have come up with our own systems, like the rights, evidence, and action, where we document our own violations. Why are we doing this? So that we can share with the world what's actually going on and share with the government and tell them why you are denying that these things are not happening. We are being violated. And so we have come up with figures that actually show what is happening, how many violations are going on. So we report these figures. Most figures are not reported, but those that we can, we try to document them and present them to the government so that even if it denies that violations are going on, we can embarrass them, we can produce these figures on the international forum, and then they have to answer. So what are we doing? We are doing community gatherings. Like I told you, we are a community organization, so we create community gatherings, we mobilize communities in our resource center. We are running the first LGBT clinic in Uganda, which provides free services, and it works 3 days a week. So it provides STI services, HIV testing, it provides treatment, and we are being supported by the International HIV/AIDS Alliance. So it is the first of its kind actually in East Africa, and we are using it as a method of showing the government how it can reach out to LGBT, because most times they say we don't know how to reach out to this community. So we said we shall start a clinic to show you how you can reach out to the community. And because the clinic is in Kampala, which is the capital, we also need to reach out to people who cannot come to the capital. So we have an outreach program. We have an outreach program where we have a van that goes out to the rural areas, that are very far from Kampala and provide the same services we are providing at the clinic to provide them also to people outside Kampala, so that we feel that we are a family. Please go ahead. Go ahead. So this is just some of the figures showing you how we do it. We just go out into the community. It's very risky, but we try to paint it that it's something about health. And so the people we are working with will know that we are working with LGBT issues, but the general population will look at us and think, oh, they're just doctors providing treatment, general treatment. And even if you come and not an LGBT person, we shall be forced to treat you because we don't want to be seen as only looking for LGBT, because then that puts us at risk. Go ahead. Go ahead. So that is our model basically. How do you brand in, you make it, you paint it as not something only specifically LGBT, but you paint it something generally health, and then know that you're targeting LGBT people. That way you can survive for a couple of rounds or so. It might be very difficult, but at least it's a way of surviving in a difficult situation. That's an example of outreaches. You can see how many people we get when you go. You go to a place and you get hundreds of people lining up and squeezing just to get the treatment, because some of them have even never heard of something like a lubricant. So when you tell them we have blood lubricants, they flood in and we have so many people to work with. And this is our reach right now. We are reaching 14 districts around the country, and we are distributing condoms and lubricants, and we're also doing a lot of sensitization with local leaders. These are the services we provide: ART services, we provide screening, we distribute materials that educate people about sexual behaviors. Of course, we distribute condoms and lubricants. And for those cases we cannot manage, we refer them to partner hospitals that we have come up with. That is a map showing our coverage generally in the country. Go ahead. Go ahead. We also train health workers in sexual orientation and gender identity, because most health workers are not trained in school. They've never heard about LGBT issues. So what we are doing is we are retraining them. We go to hospitals and clinics, and this is an example of one of the clinics we are at, just training them and telling them, this is what sexual orientation means, this is what gender identity means, this is how you deal with LGBT people, so that they get that basic information. When a gay man comes to you, this is how you approach them, because they have no information completely. So we're also doing that kind of training. And because we know most people cannot come out to us because of the stigma, we have started an online program that has all the information you can need as a gay man or as an LGBT person in terms of getting your health. I've already talked about this. This is a program where we collect violations and data to present to the government. And so basically, that is what we are doing. And moving forward, we are trying to expand these programs and make sure that we work in a clandestine way, but also make sure that we reach as many people as possible in an extremely difficult environment. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, the time was very little. Thank you.
Bueno, yo creo que ha sido realmente interesante.
I think it's been really interesting, the four speakers, the four presentations we've had. I'm going to move quickly to the questions and answers. We are almost very close to the coffee break. I don't know whether the organizers think to shorten the break, the coffee break. Do you have any questions? Good morning. First of all, I wanted to thank the speakers for telling us about the realities, the community, the LGTB community, what they are experiencing in such different countries. And I want to give them all my support for them to continue with their fight. It's all about time. Here in Spain, we started. We had a very similar situation years ago, very precarious, and we've managed to get many things, and we still have to continue. My question is that I had an experience about 15, 18 years ago when I went to Iran, and when I went to do my visa, told that I had to carry with me an HIV test with me, proving that I was positive, if I was going to be there more than 4 weeks. So I was going to be there only 3 weeks, so I didn't do this. And when I was there, I asked, why is this? And I was told that with 3 weeks, one person who goes there is not, they don't expect you to have a sexual relationship. And when I asked this, what about the LGTB community? And I was told that that doesn't exist in Iran. There's no homosexuality. So I wanted to ask you, in your countries, whether there is really, people are asked when they travel there, they have to show whether they are negative or not. Thank you very much.
In Armenia, we did have such a law. However, we changed it quite a while ago. However, I'm one of those victims of such a law. I used to work in a country for over 10 years, and when they find out that you are HIV positive, you get deported as a criminal. So luckily, I actually found out before the governments did. So. But in Armenia, we don't have, we changed it.
Okay, thank you. In Uganda, we don't have such a law. Actually, our government prides itself in being very efficient in fighting HIV. So they try to have as many laws as possible that show them to be internationally proactive in terms of HIV and AIDS. So we don't have such a law.
It's the same there in Pakistan. We don't have such laws where you have to prove that you are HIV negative. We actually have laws that protects the confidentiality of HIV positive people. So if someone discloses your HIV status, you could go to law, and there are measures that will be taken to protect you. And there is no certificate required or proof required that you are not LGBT community. The government recognizes transgender people, and right now there is a process where the government is actually recognizes the MSM behavior as well. So it's a process that may be starting. It is slow, but I think there is some positive development.
Bueno, en Chile no hay.
In Chile, there is not such a law. The system also protects the confidentiality of the person who lives with HIV. The civil society organizations, they try to avoid the discrimination that could be applied. Moreover, Chile right now is like the United States in America Latina, in Latin America. We now have a foundation called Savia, so they give you a lot of information about all the different treatments. So, in Chile, there's no restriction of treatment for people who have been certified of HIV positive. So the state guarantees this treatment, not because they have solidarity with the patients, but because they don't want the epidemic to expand. This is what is understood. So this is a positive aspect, because many people see that these treatments are needed, and in other countries are not guaranteed. Only to nationals, you see, but in Chile it's guaranteed for everyone. And they also guarantee shelter. This is our song. So for many partners from Latin America, from other countries who come to us, looking for this shelter. Any other questions? Hello, I'm Rim Roqueta from Barcelona, and I wanted to thank you all the work that you've carried out. I think this work against the HIV virus and to work for the rights of the for the collective, for the group, is a great work. And we have to be clear that the violations have to be denounced, and to fight without reproductive and sexual rights is very difficult. It's very difficult to fight against the epidemic. We are all very tired of so many years, but sometimes my partners tell me, my colleagues, that in the United Nations there are meetings about these rights, and there is a conservative lobby which is very important, and they want to remove our rights. I think it's very difficult to reach these places, but they're actually occupying a space. We have a very hard path to follow. I think we should do something on an international level, because it's impossible that there are some rights in some countries but not in others. We need to try to have a free, more fair world. You can't understand health without rights, and the governments sometimes they don't seem to care about this. We can to reach this lack of rights to an international sphere in order to fight.
Any responses? Well, I would like to say something that we heard yesterday. The agenda, we talked about PrEP, and there was a demonstration in a public entity in Chile. Despite having the guarantee and the treatment and universal coverage, we still have a problem of young people, young adults who don't continue their treatment. And it's a struggle for us. It's hard for us to understand that why there are people who are leaving aside their treatment, saying there's so many pills, but there are also psychological reasons for this. There's systemic burnout, and this is something people don't always realize. And the PrEP, our famous PrEP, and I say famous, it's not famous in Chile. It's really not even on the table for discussion, whether or not it's included in the public services. So much it's that way that I think we're in prehistoric times in Chile. When one demands rights to medicine, such as in our case, the jaguars of Latin America, as we're called, we are not entitled to this. And I would like to say that we need to demand also the right to information. There are many people who don't have information in many countries, even modern countries, developed countries, with media. There are lots of people who still don't understand what HIV positive and AIDS are. There are no faces put to those illnesses. There are no recognizable faces, bodies, names, and until you have that, this is just statistics. And statistics really have names behind them, faces. They're people, and they have rights to information, not just scientific knowledge, but political information and sexual education must be free in schools. It's not just about providing medicines to us. We have to educate our young people from the time they're very small so that they can live their sexuality as they want, but with information and sexual education and public campaigns of prevention and information on condoms and feminine types of preservatives. Well, we need to stop now for our coffee break, but thank you very much. And I also agree with Kim. We've seen in the fight against homophobia and transphobia and etc., how important it is to be able to give a proper response to HIV. I'd like just to make an ad. We're going to present this book, The History of Chile and AIDS in Chile, the 5th of July in Barcelona. We will have colleagues, doctors and scientists from Chile with us, and I'm the author of this wonderful book. Thank you. Okay, well, let's go have our coffee.